All right, here we go. So, I'm going to have to talk over the air conditioning, but it is pretty warm down here. Isn't that funny? When we were down here before during Great Lent, it was the heat that we had to talk over, and now we get to talk over the air conditioning. So, we are on step 12, and what I'd like to do, if we can, a little bit of warning here, is try to cover step 12 and step 13 today. So I know that kind of comes as a surprise, but what I'd like to do is try to, if we can get both of those, that'd be great. And then we can do step 14 next week, and then we will be leave it on step 15, whereas Father was talking about waiting until, he's talking about until Advent. I'm hoping we don't have to wait that long, but we'll work something out. But I mean, and again, it's kind of dependent on how many people we can have consistently come, because I know during Great Lent we had 3 tables packed together. We had like 20-some people fairly consistently, and then I knew it was going to drop off after Great Lent with the summer coming and everything like that. So, and a lot of times in the past we've kind of suspended our studies and things like that during the summer, just in church school and everything.
Start up again in the fall.
Exactly, start up again in the fall. But I'd like to see, because this is a good study, and also with 30 steps. I mean, even if you do one per week, that's 30 weeks. So that's a long time. So it's almost a whole year. And I talked to Dennis Perez, because St. George up in Flint was doing this. I said, well, he said, oh yeah, we finished the book. I said, you finished it, all 30 steps? Yeah, we finished all 30 steps. I said, well, how'd you guys do that? And he says, well, it was just a book club. So they didn't really go through each lesson. They kind of did a survey of it. So I was a little, for some reason I thought they were actually going to do a real study at each one of the steps, kind of like what we're doing and talking about it and stuff. And I thought, man, you guys got through it in a couple of months. I said, how long is the class? You guys here for 8 hours a night or something like that to try to knock this out? But yeah, let's see if we can get a couple of them through today. If it works, that's great. If not, we'll pick it up later. So, step 12, falsehood. Let me read the introduction. Various kinds of harm can be observed in the passions, and lying is no exception. So one judgment awaits the man who lies out of fear, another the liar who has nothing at all to worry about. One man lies for the sheer pleasure of it, and another for amusement, another to raise a laugh among bystanders, another to trap his brother and to do harm. So when I read this, I'm kind of thinking, so is he talking about various levels of lying?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and it kind of came up because as I was reading this, I thought, that's kind of interesting. So I don't know about you, but what we always taught, you never lie, right? What's a white lie? It's a lie, right?
Still
a little lie, yeah. You lie to make someone feel good sometimes. I mean, sometimes someone is really sick or something like that, and you say, well, gee, how do I look? And you're like, you look great, I mean, sometimes, and now, is that the truth or is that a lie? Someone wears something that maybe isn't too flattering or isn't too nice or, maybe not appropriate for church. How do I look? How do you handle that? I mean, is it, St. John breaks it down here as far as levels of lies. But realistically, how should we view that? Is it good, bad, and different? I don't know, I'm just talking about in our world today.
I think there's always a nice way not to lie. Even
Okay.
if someone says, do these jeans look nice on me? And there's a way to let them know they don't look nice on them.
Right.
Without
My wife says
lying
it's-
and saying you look great and let them go out looking like that. Just say,
King just don't like that combination.
yeah, like that.
Just don't like that combination. Gotcha.
The one people always say to me is like, that looks good on you. I'm like, oh, gee, wait a minute. Like, I wouldn't wear it. That sure looks good on you, Schleck. It's like, okay. So. Yeah, so I mean, and sometimes we lie, and as he's stating here, we lie for various reasons. Think about politicians or not. We kind of almost expect them to lie, don't we? Isn't that sad? I mean, are we surprised when they do? Are we surprised when some of the things come out and they're not exactly as we thought they were? Or maybe the truth is, I wouldn't say necessarily broken, but certainly bent a little bit to somebody else's advantage.
They twist the words so it can be a lying when the way he says it, doesn't sound like a lie to one person, but then it is a lie to another one. So there's always two meanings to whatever they say it is.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder what category sometimes that would fall in. And the thing is with the lying here that he's talking about falsehoods too, and then he gets into talking too much may lead us to make distasteful jokes or mocking someone in jest when they are in a fragile frame of mind. You know, sometimes we might say something kind of joking or something like that, or for me, throwaway comments, say something, and then you come to find out later, we talked about this, about being talkative, and my problem, and being quiet, and sometimes you just say something, and it's not meant one way or another, and sometimes, in my case, a lot of times, it's just a throwaway comment, could be worse or something like that, and then people say, well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Or maybe they go away thinking, well, he insulted me, and you don't really know what you did. And it's the same thing here when we talk about falsehoods. Even a little bit of falsehood sometimes can be taken the wrong way, and be taken, to the point of really hurting somebody, or at least causing confusion that could cause hurt. Now, in this chapter, he jumps into something too here on page 102, which I thought was kind of I don't know. And I read the text here too, because I'm trying to figure out where this whole thing was going. It starts talking about laughter, all right? And that to me was kind of a hard part. What'd you guys get out of that?
I think he's referring to the laughter that you get from telling a lie or a falsehood to elicit laughter from people.
Okay.
I think he's talking more about that type of laughter.
Okay.
But then they expound on it and they start talking about laughter that distracts the monk, and so then I thought, well, maybe I've got it all wrong.
I know. Well, and I thought the same thing. I thought, well, if you're telling a lie about somebody or to somebody for the sake of making them laugh, all right, you think, well, how bad is that? Think about jokes, and this is the thing too. A lot of times we have a problem with, certainly in our day and age, with humor. Anytime you tell a joke, there's always, what do you call it, like a butt of the joke. There's always someone who did something silly or did something wrong that brings up this funny situation, right? Now, without getting into, sometimes, we used to tell ethnic jokes, racial jokes, gender jokes, all those other ones, religious jokes, the one about the priest, and I won't get into it. Anyways, that was pretty funny. But, you get into all these different kind of jokes, you think, oh yeah, well, I guess that could be pretty harmful because it's a joke. It's obviously a lie because, there wouldn't be a priest and a rabbi in a plane with only 3 parachutes and all that stuff. That wouldn't really happen. But if you look at it from that standpoint, then yeah, you're telling a lie for the purpose of making somebody laugh. Now, here he's talking about this laughter kind of carrying over to the point where it's being disruptive to the life of the person as well as almost to the life of he's talking about more in a monastic sense, but the life of the community. All right? And how did he kind of couch that? I thought it was an interesting kind of way of putting it. Do you remember? He talks about it where he says, I have seen men proud of their ability to lie and exciting laughter by their clowning and joking, who have miserably destroyed in their hearers the habit of mourning. Now, and as you read here, you can see he's talking about that to the extent where, I guess, I don't know, I mean, I've never had it quite this good, but you hear a joke and you start laughing, and then suddenly you're sitting there and you think about that joke again,
exactly. And
and you go,
the
and then you're thinking, oh yeah, and then it just kind of becomes funny again, and you kind of keep remembering that joke, and that's how they're describing it here. Maybe that's what he's getting at from the laughter, is that if you continually relive that joke, and then by engaging in this laughter, then you're drawing people away from the habit of mourning. Now we come back to that again. Now what did we talk about that? Remember the earlier chapter? What's that?
Remembrance of death.
Remembrance of death. Yeah, that keeps popping up. And boy, that can be a real buzzkill, can it, right? When you're sitting there, just heard a pretty good joke, and you kind of like to enjoy it for a few minutes, hey, that's kind of fun. But then they're saying here, well, that takes you away from that serious work. So to me, I kind of had a problem with it. And it was just kind of like something in this chapter on falsehood. It he kind of stuck it in there, and it seems to me at least a little bit out of place. But, and I'm struggling a little bit to see where he's going with this. And the author of this book here, he tries to work with it. And it's interesting because in this other text, so I actually read 3 different texts trying to figure out where he was going with this. In this one, he never even talks about it. He doesn't even approach it. He has a tendency in this one not to take some of the harder, odder subjects because it's a little bit shorter too. But in this one here, he tried to explain. He said, so I'm down here, bottom of page 102. So why is St. John so negative about joking and laughter? He says, perhaps an example I'm sure we can all identify with will help. Have you ever heard of something so funny you found yourself laughing uncontrollably for minutes, even hours? I wouldn't put it that way. That can wreak havoc on a monk's prayer. So again, if we keep it in our mind that this is all about monks and the monastic life and trying to help monks, all right, that's very important.
Well, I think it's just about moderation.
Okay.
I mean, to apply to us.
Right.
You can spend your whole day thinking about jokes. I know people who have a whole book of jokes in their
Right,
head. That's
right.
all they do.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't
That's true.
want to go there.
Yeah. And again, so what's the problem? That, I mean, if we want to say it takes you away from the habit of mourning, but what does he really mean by this habit of mourning? Is it being mournful? No.
Bring what we're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. Remembering what the important stuff is. So it's that level of sobriety, really, that he's talking about. Now, it's tough, as he's talking about here. You know, you've heard laughter is the best medicine, things like that. In, you know, some things. I mean, even in sermons and preaching and stuff like that, they say it's good to try to throw in a joke, you know, and this, you know, to try to keep people engaged. Well, I guess it depends on what the topic is and what the purpose is and how far you want to take it. If you're going to do a stand-up comedy routine, that's one thing. If you're going to do that to kind of engage or to make a point in a humorous way, I think that's something else. But I think, and again, if we're looking at this, as I thought about this, not trying to hammer too hard on certain groups, but I mean, in a lot of places, that is really more or less what their religious life is. I wouldn't say so much laughter, but certainly entertainment, right? So, and I'm thinking more of some of the community, bigger mega churches where they're constantly entertaining. They're constantly having people have to have fun. Now, whether it's a joke to laugh at or just having that kind of engagement where you're constantly engaged, that is the whole form of their religion, right? Now, is that good, bad, and different? Good question.
Well, they're certainly not remembering death. That's
Okay,
for sure.
but you got to get back again. What is the purpose of remembering death?
Prayer.
Prayer.
Part of the reason why I think you don't laugh
Repentance.
like that if you live in a monastery is because a lot of the monks are trying to obtain the prayer of the heart. And when you try to pray unceasing, laughter disrupts the prayer.
Sure.
That's really all it is.
Now, but how can we apply that to our lives here? Would it be the same way?
Sure. Our spirituality isn't any different than theirs. You could try to obtain the prayer of the heart too if you wanted. So you'd have to have a certain level of sobriety
Sure.
where you wouldn't joke or laugh all that.
Right.
You'd be more serious, though you could smile.
But how much is enough
That's all.
seriousness?
Well,
Because you know,
it depends on the person. Each person is going to be different. So you can't have a general rule that applies to the masses. The rule has to be applied to you. That's also why he says you examine yourself, not others. So it would be the same with that. So for you, for example, if I'm serious, perhaps for you or for my wife, you'd say, it's too much. It almost seems simple. And then for the next person, you know, a little lighter would be better, and they're still able to pray and maintain. So it's just going to be different for each person, I think. But I think as a general point of view from like St. John Germanicus would be, you're striving for the prayer, sobriety, you don't joke all that.
Okay.
Certainly you can have good thoughts. God wants us to love. He wants all that stuff.
Right. And I think too is what kind of stuff do we joke about too. And I think a lot of times we can take some of the things that we do as part of our worship, and maybe even kind of make little jokes about that, good, bad, or indifferent. You know, I mean, the big thing is the length of time of the services, right? I mean, you know, and sometimes that could be something, a subject of maybe a little bit of joking. Maybe we think that it kind of eases some of the, let's say, the pain, some of the pressure that people experience, because a lot of people, even Orthodox, but I know a lot of people who are just visiting, might have an issue with standing for a couple hours, you know, so sometimes it doesn't hurt to kind of say, yep, we understand, we know it's tough, but you know, that's how we worship. And I mean, not being apologetic, but maybe introducing some humor to it. But no, that's good insight, thanks, John, because that is definitely true. And so the level of that, I guess the laughter and things like that. I mean, let me ask you. I mean, was it always mournful? Was it always sad? Was it always at the monastery when you were?
Oh no. Oh no. It's good time. I'll be honest with you. I got in trouble, sort of. And this monk is on the holy monk. So
Okay.
we'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
But we were laughing in the kitchen so much we had disturbed the monks down
See,
the
there
hall.
you go. It's a perfect example.
And they came in and said, "What's going on?" And we're like, but we had taken it just a little too far.
Right.
We had been cooking and we had been.
Yeah, it'd been a busy
It was
day.
total innocent, just
Yeah.
prayer. It was a nice time, but we had taken it the step, and we disturbed people down the hall. So,
Oh my gosh, really? Wow.
yeah, it's okay. But so is it all, no.
Yeah.
Thank
But I
God.
mean, but again, the
Thank God
purpose
for
of
all
it,
things.
yeah. But I mean, the purpose of it was because it was disturbing.
Right, we were being loud.
Yeah. So I think that's that's excellent. That's a good way of really summing it up, to be able to be happy and to, you know, the thing that you read a lot about is that when you, okay, think about the Beatitudes. We think about blessed, 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 right? What does that mean to be blessed? That word, blessed, in Greek. What is it, Makarios? Is that the word? What does that mean? It's probably mispronouncing it. Blessed. What does it mean to be blessed? It's an old English word, right? Special,
Receiving grace, maybe?
receiving grace,
Favored by God.
favored by God. From what I read, and again, I'm no expert on it, the literal translation is happy. It's a form of happy. Happy are those that do. Happy are those that do this. Happy, maybe even joyful. I mean, but it's not like the laughing in the kitchen. It's like that joy that we receive because of all these different things that we're doing for the sake of God's kingdom, right? And if you think about the Beatitudes, as we sing them every time we go in there, all those different things. Again, it's that typical Jesus paradigm almost. Those extremes, right? Happy are those who hunger, right? Because they will be fed. All those kind of things. It's like that's the extremes that are being presented there, and that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to make us happy. We're supposed to be joyful, right? Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Those kind of things. Now, the purpose of that joy is directed towards God, and I'm sure there's nothing wrong with having joy directed towards other people, other situations, having a little bit of fun. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, and I don't know if it was quite explained. Again, this is being geared more towards monastics, right? Monks, a monk writing to monks about monks, how to be monks, those kind of things. So in that sort of situation, it might be different. And again, you got to think about situational too. Maybe wandering through at a funeral or something like that may not be the time to sit back and start laughing or something.
Lately, I've been going to funerals. When I enter the room, I'm thinking, am I entering a funeral or a cocktail party?
Yeah.
I can't believe the laughing and the loudness of the talking. Has it always been this way, or are we changing as a society at funeral parties?
I think, funeral homes.
Usually.
Yeah, I think it's changing because I don't remember it quite that bad. But I mean, again, I'm not that old, so I don't really know. But I was talking to a gal on the van pool. I don't know how we got on the topic, and she was saying that she went to her mother-in-law's funeral, at the funeral visitation, and they pulled into the parking lot, and there was a bunch of people hanging on the tailgate of this truck, drinking beer out of a
yeah.
cooler.
I've heard of
And
that too.
and she said she went in there and she told the people at the funeral home, hey, there's a bunch of people out there. These weren't kids; these were adults partying out in your parking lot. And they go, oh, those are the family members out there. So they pulled in with the truck or whatever, dropped the tailgate, and had a cooler of beer. She said, and they were out there proceeding to get drunk out in the parking lot just before the funeral visitation, whatever was going on. So I don't know. I guess it's a pre-wake or something.
The Irish do it if they drink
Yeah,
pre-wakes and stuff.
yeah, but I mean
It
afterwards
could
and
have been
stuff.
Irish thing.
Could have been, yeah, could have been. But yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. But, talking about how the things have changed, and in fact, I got to go to a memorial service for my aunt on Friday. It's kind of sad because she was down in Carolina and cremated, so they're bringing her ashes up here and doing a memorial service. And I've been to a couple of those. And they seem to be doing more of those these days with the cremation because her husband was cremated as well. And that whole situation was a little sad. But I mean, it is a bit different, and I just don't know. Every time I go to them, they're not really too clear. I guess it's more there for the family, So, but I think the whole funeral thing has changed because it's not that remembrance of death. It's not that mourning. Someone made a point. I never really thought about this until they mentioned it. They said, they went to a funeral and the person never mentioned anything about, praying for their forgiveness, praying for their salvation, forgiving their sins, things like that. None of that even came up because you don't want to talk about unhappy things. You want to talk about happy things. You want to talk about, nice stories and stuff like that. That's the remembrance really of what it is. So you want to talk about the remembrance of death. It's not as St. John was pointing out here, where this may be your last day, your last breath. Let's try to get it right. Let's try to live like it's our last day. It's like, well, hey, let's live it up because it might be the last day. Let's have a great time. Let's remember all the good times and not get bogged down on the sadness. So, and I mean, that could be a whole study in itself about whether it's good or bad. The closure thing. Is it good to go to funerals and cry? Is it good to go to funerals and be sad? What place does that play in the whole?
I mean, how can you not be sad?
And that's the thing. But I mean, it's almost, sadness is almost outlawed, almost illegal, to really feel that kind of sadness. And certainly, everybody in the whole process is working on eliminating that as much as possible. So instead of saying, the grieving is an important part, a natural part, we all know you're going to cry, and you should cry, because this person is gone. Understanding that there is the hope of the salvation, but that's why we pray that their sins are forgiven. That's why we pray for the mercy of that person. But instead, just take it and make it like one big Disneyland ride or something like that, where there is no consideration of what the alternatives might be for those who don't live a godly life, those who don't try to live a godly life. So, things to think about from that standpoint. So moving on. Now he's talking about lying here. I'm on page 104. And so throughout the Bible, and they give a few very good points here about people lying. Now, nowhere in the Bible were they condemned for lying. He's talking about, here he says, now let us return to the main theme of this 12th step of the ladder, which is falsehood. This by no means is an easy subject to tackle because falsehood is a very broad word. It covers a whole range of things from breaking the ancient commandment, you should not bear false witness against your neighbor, all right? Which is, of course, a direct violation of the mother of all commandments, love your neighbor as yourself, to saying, you look nice to a woman in a skirt that she brought, which you think actually looks ridiculous. Put that in there. As St. John points out towards the end of his brief chapter on falsehood, you cannot put all lies in one category, let alone condemn every lie as a sin. He mentions an example from the scriptures, this is Joshua 2:1, that liars frequently appeal to in order to justify their love for falsehood. He's talking about the prostitute Rahab, who lies about the whereabouts of Joshua's men in order to protect them. That's when they were spying on Jericho, you remember that? She put the sash down the window, and they crawled out that way. So, and then also, this one here, this is the one story I always thought was kind of weird. The next one, I shouldn't say weird, just kind of odd. From Genesis 11 through 13, when Abraham tells his wife to say that she's his sister for fear envious men would kill him and take his wife from them. We remember what happened to that, right? That one king took her, and come to find out, he comes back and goes, oh, no, that's my wife. And he goes, oh, no, you brought this sin upon me. And then Abraham, what happens? He does pretty well. He gets all these riches as a result of that lie. Kind of helps build up his fortune. Kind of interesting. And so when they're talking about lies, you can, and what he's saying is that, people might want to use that to justify their lying. So if you come up to somebody, they're lying, you catch them in a lie, you go, oh, no, that's not, remember Rahab in Joshua 2:1? Well, she lied and she saved people, so that says that lying is okay, if the reason is good, or what about Abraham, so there's people who like to play the lawyer, but I mean, what is the problem in those situations, though? Where can that run into problems? If we're using the scriptures to justify our actions such as that, where could that go?
Use it to justify other things.
Okay, yeah, like what else? Like eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth and all these other things that realistically, if somebody turns around and says that, we're fully justified, right? Now you can say, well, no, we're Christians and we don't have those commandments and Christ laid those aside. We're under mercy, not under law, those other things. But say, well, wait a minute. This is the Bible, this is the Old Testament, this is what it says.
Just like they say, 2 wrongs don't make a right.
There you go.
But it makes us even.
Thank you for that, John. And with that justification, but no, and we could also say things like, well, look at St. Peter. He lied through his teeth, didn't he?
I always think about hiding the Jews from the Nazis. People lied for them.
Oh, she was, yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.
Many Jews here? No, not one.
And those people lied and risked their own lives.
I will bring one more thing up, and everyone should read this.
Okay.
But it would be for a
Is it the
different
Bible?
topic. No.
Okay.
St. John Chrysostom and the priesthood.
Yes, that is.
There's a good, read that, and you'll be like, huh. As far as lying with this.
Right. Well,
That's
yeah. That
I don't know what to think about that. So.
That's an interesting read. It's just a little book, and it's just him and his dialogue with his buddy or something like that when they were trying to decide whether or not to go into the priesthood, and it was just it's that classic rhetorical style where you set up a foil, you set up somebody who asks a question and you answer it, and that's kind of how the whole dialogue goes. And there's some pretty, yeah, you're right. There's some pretty interesting things in there on the priesthood. Yeah, that's very good.
Basically tricks his friend into becoming a priest.
Exactly.
Although St. John Chrysostom was a holy man.
Yeah, but
He was a saint.
he was a saint. Yeah. So
It's interesting.
thanks for that. So yeah, and then he goes on with rumors and gossip. So he says he's talking about here. I'm on page 105. All the time I hear Christians spreading malicious rumors about others and justifying it by saying, "I heard this from a reliable source." 2 things must be said about this. And like he says here, there's no doubt the reliable source received the information from another reliable source, and that reliable source from another reliable source. What's he talking about here? What's going on? Gossip,
Gossip, yeah.
right? And as you keep going further back in your reliable sources, It's kind of like that telephone game. How does that message get changed? People don't understand the context. They don't understand the people. They don't understand maybe the motivation behind it. And sometimes it's, you know, you want to add to a conversation. Maybe you want to be the center of the conversation, center of attention. So it's like, well, I heard, and then next thing you know, we start going into this. Now, well, what happens if it's true? Then is it a rumor? Is it gossip? Is it if it's true?
It's still gossip because you're still spreading something about someone else.
Yeah.
And we're not supposed to air other people's sins. We're supposed to hide our brother's sins.
Right, exactly. And I mean, what about, I mean, you can say, well, this is true. This person did it. I'm just warning you, just so, you know, make sure you don't leave your purse out because, you know, this guy's light finger type of thing. I mean, is that justified?
You do that really?
You're not supposed to do that. You're still supposed to hide your brother's sin. You're not supposed to be saying it, even if it's true. You're not supposed to be saying it.
Unless in case of children, then you have to.
Well, yes.
See, now that gets into another situation too, because when you're talking about, so from the standpoint of the, what is it, the, what's the word? Sexual misconduct, that's what I'm doing. So anytime something like that occurs, if somebody comes by and says, you know, I think so-and-so is doing these things, whatever it is that's wrong, right? You have a responsibility to report that up. So now, you know, how far can you hide the sins? And this is the thing, I know in part with the Roman Catholic Church they got into a big problem with, right? And they were trying, I don't know if they were necessarily trying to hide it, maybe in the beginning, but certainly they were trying to look at it from the standpoint of a sinner that needs to have his sins hidden and to deal with those himself and to try to work through those situations. And we see how that ended up because it just kept going on and on. So especially within the church here, if we find those things out, we are obligated to report it. We're not obligated to investigate it to find if there's any validity to it. It's just you're supposed to report it. Now, you know, there can always set people up for a lot of problems. But
that's why you have a priest. You know, you report it to the priest, and it's his responsibility to determine what is true and what is not true. And
no, he's got to keep reporting. Yeah, so he reports it up. Eventually, it goes over to the police. So we have a responsibility to report it to the police. Because you don't, and that's the thing you want to avoid, because that's what happened with the Roman Catholic Church, where they were saying, well, we'll take care of it. We'll go ahead and I'll report it to my priest, or the priest reports it to the bishop or to the archbishop or whatever else.
Did you see Spotlight?
Sorry?
Did you see Spotlight?
No, I didn't.
Oh, Oscar-winning movie last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No.
It's about that.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. No, I didn't see that. Maybe I should. But I mean that's kind of that's about the But I mean, so they were within their system. They were doing everything right.
But they didn't carry it further from
Right,
there.
but they did everything wrong. So they were going to rehabilitate this person, move him from parish to parish or whatever, or stick him out in another administrative position. And they found that there was no rehabilitating him. He was because of his issues, but there was nothing really done to stop them. And then there was no justice from the standpoint of our criminal law system to address those kind of issues. So with us, you're absolutely right. If you see something, you report it up. Now, it doesn't mean that you launch your own investigation and say, well, I'm going to look at this first and see whether or not this person actually is committing these crimes. It's not your job. In fact, you don't want to get involved in that because that can be even more problems for you. You report it up, and the responsibility of the priest and the bishop is to go to the authorities and report it. So and I think in some ways that is good, but if it's just rumors, if it's just hearsay or something like that, you can see even that case how it can cause disruption not only to that person who's the subject of that, but certainly to their family, to the whole parish, it kind of goes up and down. So it's a very tricky thing, but you're hoping that if that does, come up and it is brought forward to the authorities, that the investigation will prove it either false or to have some validity. So yeah, so even so, we do need to be very conscientious of that and be careful. Now he talks also about false promises here, and this is kind of interesting. I'm on 107. Again, you have heard that you should not said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all. Now, this is another one of those words that kind of gets misconstrued. Don't swear at all. So what does that mean? Don't
Swear I'll never.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Or or you make a contract, and this is the whole point, because people would make contracts, and that's how a contract was.
Like a prenup?
Not necessarily even a prenup, just something else. I would do something for you, and you go, really? Well, what's the surety that I have that you're going to do this? I swear on the temple, or I swear on God, I swear on my mother's grave, or whatever you want to say. But that's the swearing that they're referring to. So when we say swearing, we think we're, cuss words or something like that. That's not really the swearing that they're talking about. They're saying, you're turning around and you're saying, I swear on God, all right? Or I swear on the temple.
I swear to tell the whole truth.
Nothing but the truth, so help me God. And what do you have your hand on?
The Bible.
The Bible, right. Now why? Because that's supposed to, but I mean, can you necessarily swear on something that you don't own, God does not, so you do lie, all right? God's not going to turn around and tell the truth for you. Now the idea is if you do, then God will strike you down, because you're swearing on Him, you're affirming on His name, right, on the book, on His name, that you are going to tell the truth, all right? Now before they had that, as they were saying in the Old Testament, they would come by and they would give their surety, their oath, would not just be a handshake or whatever, whatever, but they would say, I promise on the temple, or God, or something like that, And that's the whole idea, because we can't turn around and kind of use God as a marker for our own commitments. If that makes any sense.
And nowadays we have mortgages instead.
There you go. Yeah, we have real property. Yeah. And that's the surety that you're going to pay it off. If not, to get the property. But but back then you didn't necessarily have that. And also we also have laws against perjury, against filing false reports, things like that. You can get a loan, an unsecured loan, but what are you going to do? You're going to pay high interest rates and all these other things. So you want to make sure you have a secured loan. But that's kind of the situation that they had there. So the idea is, when you're making these false promises, again, it's saying that when you swear, here down at the bottom, again, this is from Matthew. Do not swear at all. Now, it doesn't mean don't curse or say naughty words. Do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, right? Nor by the earth, for it is His footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair black or white. All right. So it's when you're making false promises, is what they're saying is that you promise to do something on something that against something that you don't really own, and you don't have any real point in making these promises. So apparently, I'm sure it doesn't happen anymore, but apparently back then there was a lot of this going around where people would make these kind of promises, these false promises against the temple, against heaven, against the earth, against your head, all these other things, as some way of showing the validity and the sincere interest in fulfilling that commitment. All right. So what does he say? You turn the page. What does it say at the top of the page, 108? Let your yes be yes, and your no, no. For whatever is more than these is from the evil one. Now, what does he mean by that?
Be a straight shooter.
There you go. Be a straight shooter.
Don't say yes and then not do it.
And
Don't
not
say
do it.
no and then do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't there a story about that? Which one is the lesser, greater sinner? The one who said no and then went out and did it?
Right.
What's that story?
Yeah, well, that was
One
that
of
was
the lesser. We just kind of read it. I think.
yeah, we did.
And the other told the master he would do it and then wouldn't do it and then did it.
Right.
I
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how that story went. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because he said, which one was truest to the master? Was the one who said he wouldn't do it and didn't do it, rather than the one who said he would and didn't. And it's the same thing we're talking about here. So really what they're saying is that your honor, your pride would then be, I guess, the voucher, as it were, for this commitment that you're making. Be a straight shooter. Someone says, yeah, I know if so-and-so says they're going to do it, that's good enough for me. I don't need to say we got a promise, pinky promise or whatever. Swear by the temple, swear on a stack of Bibles or something like that. No, if someone says it, I believe that person is telling the truth.
Depends on the person, though.
Ah.
Because I have one son that says, yes, Mama, I'll do it, and doesn't do it. And I have another son that will always, no, I'm not going to do it, and then 2 minutes later goes and does it.
Really?
Yeah.
What, so.
I won't tell you who is who.
Okay.
Yeah, we can figure that out.
I'll probably figure it out, but.
So the one that says he'll do it and doesn't do it, I have to say, do you swear? Do you promise?
Oh no, you're making him swear.
Do you
Swear on the
promise?
church. I should say, swear on the church.
I haven't gone that far, but I'll
Okay.
say, you promise? I
No,
should
what do
get
you-
the Bible out.
Yeah, there you go. Yep, there you go. Put your hand on that. Well, and I think sometimes it's just like, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, it's just like, not that guys ever do that, but just sometimes. But yeah, it's like, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, yeah, and just kind of let it. Do they let it? No, you don't ever say, yeah, sure, yeah, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So but yeah, that's really what we're talking about here. It's just being that, I guess, that kind of person where people will know exactly where you are, where you're coming from, and my word is my bond, that kind of thing. Now, finally, here in this chapter, it goes on about hypocrisy. The passion of falsehood is something deeper than telling a lie, out of the necessity or to avoid causing needless offense. It is rooted in one of the worst sins of all, hypocrisy. And here's from St. John. Hypocrisy is the mother of lying, and frequently its cause. Hypocrisy, lying. Some would argue that hypocrisy is nothing other than the meditation on falsehood, that it is the inventor of falsehood laced with lies. Then he goes on, he says, the original meaning of the word hypocrisy is pretense, and hypocrite means actor. So for as long as we are pretending to be something we are not, inasmuch as we want others to see not us as we are, but as we want to be seen, we will be an embodiment of falsehood. So what is that telling you? How does that kind of tie in just what we were talking about, really?
Be a straight shooter.
There you go, the straight shooter. Yeah. Kind of what you see is what you get, right? I mean, in all of us, I mean, the hypocrisy is from the standpoint that, well, think about Christ. What did he call the Pharisees? You hypocrites, right? You brood of vipers, you hypocrites. He referred to them as being whitewashed sepulchres, right? What did he mean by that?
They were dead.
They were dead on the inside, but how do they look on the outside? Nice. Yeah, they were whitewashed. They were all clean.
Sharp dressed.
Yeah, sharp dressed. They had they looked nice, but really on the inside, they were all death. They were bones, and in the Jewish faith, that's corruption. You don't touch what's dead because you're unclean. So that was the whole point with the hypocrisy, and that's really what we're talking about here as well. You're acting. You're acting to be someone that you really aren't. And I guess, when you think about that, I guess a lot of us do have to be somebody that maybe we're not comfortable with sometimes. I think about that especially at work. There's a lot of people that I just don't like dealing with. Now, is it hypocritical that I kind of put on a good face and sit down at the meeting and say, okay, let's try to solve your problem for you and stuff like that? Maybe it is. I mean, if I was a straight shooter, I'd come in there and say, no, I'm not going to do it because I don't like you. Get on my nerves and, have a nice day. And I just walk out. I mean, right?
You wouldn't have your job for very long.
No, you wouldn't.
You just need to be a technician.
Oh, I've done that before. That's how I learned to tell everyone it only takes 20 minutes. 'Cause I did that was computer repair for a number of years, so I know how that is. When someone's looking over and they go, well, how long is this going to take? 20 minutes. Okay, and I'll go off. We come back, hey, are you done yet? No, it's going to be another 20 minutes. I don't know why 20 minutes. We tell them a half hour. It's like, a half hour? That's too long. But 20 minutes is enough to get them out of your hair so you can finish the job. Now, see,
Is that falsehood?
that's falsehood. That
So
is.
it's straight up.
That's straight up, yeah. Hypocrisy, see?
You gotta finish it. If he wants you to get it done,
That's what you say, yeah. It's like, well, with your help, an hour. Without your help, 20 minutes.
there you go.
And that's,
I mean, look at the picture.
yeah.
Look at the picture.
Yeah, so I guess just kind of looking at, I don't know if you have the ladder here, but I marked some things here, so I'm going to go over this real quick and we can just close up on this chapter. I'm on page 161. It says, the various kinds of harm can be observed in the passions, and lying is no exception. So one judgment awaits the man who lies out of fear. I think we talked about this. Another the liar who has nothing at all to worry about. One man lies for the sheer pleasure of it, another for amusement, another to raise a laugh among bystanders, another to trap his brother and to do him harm. Now, it's interesting here because he doesn't say what judgment await, the level of judgment. So he is obviously saying that there is levels of lying. I guess you could say it's all bad. Maybe different levels of it. I'm still on page 161. Only when we are completely free of the urge to lie, and this is interesting, may we resort to it. And then only in fear and out of necessity. He says, a baby does not know how to lie, and neither does a soul cleansed of evil. So, those who have reached a certain level of sanctity, I guess, are free to lie. Right? We'll leave it at that. That's what I'm reading here. It's kind of an interesting contrast because I thought, how can you be holy if you're lying? But it says, hey, only when you're completely free of the urge to lie, may we resort to it. So, okay. I don't want to, but I want to do it anyways. What does he mean by that? That's kind of an odd.
Well, your reasoning is at a completely different level.
Right.
Why you would choose to do something like that.
Right.
I think it's more of a redirect.
Okay, explain that.
Let's see. I don't know if I can make a good example. So your intent is not to lie.
Mm-hmm.
But the person, let's say, is going to harm themselves, or something's going to happen to harm others.
Okay.
So you're a person of purity. So you redirect them away from that. So you're directing them away from sinning.
Right.
By somewhat telling maybe it's not quite a lie, but more, see, now I'm splitting hairs.
Yeah.
Like almost an untruth, but maybe it's not an untruth.
Right.
As an example, let's say you have a bad pair of pants.
Okay.
You use that, this is a real bad example. Instead of just saying, you know what, those look terrible.
Right.
Or instead of saying, yeah, those look really good, just say, those are very interesting pants. Now, I didn't say they look bad, and I didn't say they look good.
You didn't say they look good on me.
Right. But it's sort of a redirect.
Right.
And maybe, I mean, that's a real bad
So really,
example.
no, I understand, but you're saying that the ends justify the means.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm trying to shed some light on that.
Right. It's a very, very tough.
I know that
Thanks.
doesn't justify it.
Yeah, I know. And I don't think that's what he's trying to say here either. I think again, if the idea behind it is to help somebody, to save somebody, don't go over there. What do you tell the kids? Don't go in the pool. There's sea monsters or something like that, or something. I mean, it's got to be something they can relate to. Because if you say, well, if you go in there, you're going to drown. What does that mean? Death. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything to them. But if you go in there, there's sharks, as we tell the kids. There's sharks in the water, and I mean, they understood it enough. Now, that was a lie. no sharks out of Thompson Lake. I hope not, But I mean, the idea is that, okay, stay away from the water, don't go in too deep, because there is some sort of danger in there. So.
See, Disney was, what did just say.
Oh, Lord.
Please no swimming, just say.
Yeah.
Do not go near this pond.
There's alligators.
People who go to Florida, you gotta stay away from all ponds.
Yes.
All ponds.
Even water hazards on the golf course. Anything that has
Yeah, they've
water.
been on
Yep.
golf courses too.
Yep.
There's no way to tell how many. They didn't even know how many alligators were in there. I mean, it's just.
No. Yeah, I saw that. That was tough. That's gotta be tough. So let's see if we can go ahead and tackle step 13. Step 13, despondency and tedium, and this is another interesting one. I'll read the opening paragraph. Tedium is paralysis of the soul, a slackness of the mind, a neglect of religious exercises, a hostility to vows taken. It is an approval of worldly things. It is a voice claiming that God has no mercy and no love of men. It is a laziness in the singing of psalms, a weakness in prayer, a stubborn urge for service, a dedication to the work of hands, an indifference to the requirements of obedience. Did anyone get to read this? I know I kind of sprung this on you.
I'm sorry.
Didn't? Okay. Yeah, because this was something I found very, very interesting as he's talking about this. And I'm going to jump ahead real quick because this is the thing I found very interesting. Page 111. Tedium loves to be involved in hospitality, urges the hermit to undertake manual labor so as to enable him to give alms, and exhorts us to visit the sick, recalling even the words of him who said, I was sick and you came to visit me. All right? Now, we've got to be careful here. So when we read this, and again, it's without putting it in the context and kind of talking about it. If you just in that setting, just in those words, what do you think that's telling you?
Sounds as if that they're using it as an excuse to move away from their other monk duties.
Right, their other monk duties. But if you just turn around and read this as it sits there, what can you conclude? You conclude, oh well, gee whiz, I don't want to be.
Any of that.
Yeah, I shouldn't be doing any of that.
But that's not.
That's
what
not right.
they're
Yeah.
saying.
See,
Martha and Mary.
the whole Martha and Mary. Yeah.
And who would have brought out all the drinks I always see myself as being the one and getting in trouble. Because that's my job.
Right.
Usually, because I'm the oldest sister.
Sure.
So would have I gotten in trouble that day? Because if Jesus was sitting in my family room, I know I would have been running around like Edith Bunker.
Oh, gee. every time I see her running back and forth, everything she does is
TV land.
Yeah, all in the family.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the question would be, then you go to your sister Catherine and say,
Catherine, get up and
Lord,
help me.
look at Catherine, she's just sitting here.
Like a prima donna.
Yeah, like a prima donna, and I'm over here getting everything for
She'd be
everybody.
smiling at you.
And she'd say, I'm doing the good thing, I'm doing the right thing. But yeah, but I mean, even in that case there, the point is that, I think it was more in her response to that. Because then you look at the other situation where you had the woman that was pouring the oil on his feet, where he was sitting on the couch. When they ate, they lay down. It seemed kind of uncomfortable, but they were reclining on the couch, and she poured this oil on his feet, and she dried it with her hair, and she was kissing his feet. And the Pharisee that was hosting him, he says, if you're such a big prophet, how come you don't know that was a prostitute that's doing that to your feet? And he says, we'll take a minute and talk about this, I came in, he said, you didn't give me anything to wash my feet, and she's been washing them endlessly with her tears. You didn't anoint me, with oil, which is the hospitality, but she's poured this expensive perfume, on my feet. You didn't do any of these things, and she's been doing that the whole time. So who was the one who was showing the greater love? The person who, brought you into his house and gave you something to eat, or the one that was actually showing that kind of love by doing that kind of service? And it's kind of similar to what we look at with the Mary and Martha, and what we're looking at here too. If we look at this as being the sole purpose of our religious life, and this gets into the whole thing too when we talk about the CIA, right? We go over there, and again, nothing wrong with that, and we got to remember that it's important for us to do that, because Christ says that, feed the hungry, visit the sick, visit those in prison. That's what we have to do as Christians. But when that becomes our whole focus, our whole direction, our whole purpose of coming to church to do our ministries, all right, then we're missing the point. And that's where the tedium comes in. Because like you say, you're using that as an excuse not to really do the hard work, or the heart work, the H-E-R-T work, where you're praying and meditating and actually working on your own salvation, working on your relationship with God, thinking that these activities are working on your relationship with God. Now, they're means to an end, sure. I don't think, it gets back to the works and faith, right? If you have that faith, you're going to want to do the works. But if those works become the whole purpose of your faith, the only thing about your faith, then, yeah, a lot of times people are going to see that. There are going to be people who will benefit from it, but I don't think you personally will benefit from it completely in the long run. And that's essentially what he's talking about here. So when we see these things, these activities, that's what it is, this busyness. I think I made a note somewhere here. I just said kind of being busy. Yeah, keeping busy as being, I guess, a substitute for really praying for people, praying with people, or even just sitting there and listening to them, being that kind of presence. Because that presence not only helps them, but certainly in my case helps me, teaches me to shut up for a minute, which is hard obviously, and to listen and to allow somebody else to talk and to kind of figure out their own problems, not to solve them, right? So it's good. And when he talks about this from the standpoint, bless you, of despondency, he calls it despondency or tedium of the spirit. He says, as I've often said, I'm reading from 162 here in the latter text. He says, despondency or tedium of spirit, as I've often said, is frequently an aspect of talkativeness, and indeed is its first child. For this reason, I have given it an appropriate place in the chain of vices. All right. So, tedium is the paralysis of the soul, the slackness. I think we went over that. Of the mind, the neglect of religious exercises, hostility to vows taken. Again, talking about monks. It is an approval of worldly things. It is a voice claiming that God has no mercy and no love for men. It is a laziness in the singing of psalms, a weakness in the prayer, a stubborn urge for service and a dedication to the work of the hands, and indifference to the requirement of obedience. An obedient person does not know such tedium, for he has used the things of the senses to reach the level of the Spirit. All right? So that's kind of interesting. So again, what he's talking about, and he's using this as an example of tedium being involved in hospitality, because that is where you get the busyness. Now, sometimes when you do that, what is the reason for all that busyness, I guess? I mean, I know it needs to be done, right? That's the way I see it. It needs to be done. But what else? What could be another reason, especially, I guess, in a monastic setting?
So you don't have remembrance of death.
Okay. You don't have the remembrance of death. You don't have to.
You don't want to.
Yeah. I find for myself, if sometimes if I'm angry or something, I can't work something out, like at work, usually for work, or something with interpersonal relationships, I find something to do, right? I do that because it helps me not have to think about that and face that if I just sat there, even in prayer or in meditation, not from the standpoint of the remembrance of what do we call it? The remembrance of sins or something. Remember the previous chapter we were talking about the guy who sat there in the cell. Yeah, remembrance of wrongs. Where he sat in the cell and kept going over that, right? So when you're by yourself, you're not doing anything else but being by yourself. That sometimes can be a spooky place to be, because now you have to face yourself. You have to face all these memories. And if you're remembering all these things, those are coming back. And it's the same thing with this here as far as the despondency goes. So if you're not able to pray, if you're not able to sing the Psalms and follow those sort of the rules of prayer and different things like that, then you have to have a substitute for it, right? And so a lot of times, I find in my life, it's to do something, to get out there and do something. Maybe the excuse is, well, if I don't do it, nobody else will, or I usually say, man, I'm tired of looking at this. But a lot of times it's just because I got to find something to do, because if I don't, then maybe I have to face probably a shortcoming in me. It probably has more to do with me than anybody else, but there's that shortcoming. So now I have to be with myself and sit there with that guy and try to work through these problems that sometimes I'm either not ready to or don't want to. So we got to be careful with that as well. And again, it's important, but I think, and as you pointed out with the Mary and Martha, what's the most important thing to do? And Jesus pointed that out. Right? It's to listen, to be there because Jesus is there, and to be there with Jesus, to be there with him, rather than to run around. And again, somebody has to do it. There's nothing wrong with that. Down at the bottom of page 163, I'm reading from this because this has got some good stuff in it. I'm sorry, I'm on the latter book. He says, the man who mourns for himself does not suffer from tedium. Boy, we're back to that again. This tyrant should be overcome by the remembrance of past sins, battered by hard manual labor and brought to book by the thought of the blessings to come. And when led before the tribunal, let these be the questions put to him. You there, you crass and sluggish creature, what was it that evilly beget the likes of you? Who are your children? Who are your enemies? Who can destroy you? And tedium may be constrained to reply, I cannot lay my head among those who are truly obedient, and I live quietly where I may. I have many mothers. Stolidity of soul. What does that mean? Stolidity of soul. Stolidity of soul. Forgetfulness of the things of heaven. Or, sometimes, too heavy a burden of troubles. All those things. My children who live with me are changing from place to place. I thought that was interesting. Disobedience to one's superiors. Forgetfulness of the judgment to come. Getting back to that. And sometimes the abandonment of one's vocation, as we get to monks. But I like that. He said, so he talks about my children. That means that's what spawned from this tedium, changing from place to place. Now, why do you think that would be?
Because you can't sit still in one place.
You can't sit still, right? You got to have that change. You have to have that.
It's also disruptive.
There you go. It's disruptive. It's disruptive. So what happens if your life is disruptive, even a little bit? You have work to do, right? So now you have something to avoid that tedium of having to face yourself, to face God, to pray, to do those things that you should be doing. So, kind of interesting. But yeah, I just like the way he kind of puts this because, and this is kind of sort of the same way when you talk about on the priesthood, when he talks about that, it's like that dialogue. So it's kind of interesting the way it's set up. But again, he comes back to the man who mourns for himself does not suffer from tedium. So his big thing, we keep coming back to that throughout this, is that remembrance of death. So I mean that's something that I've certainly taken from the study. I mean hopefully not from a morbid sense, but certainly from an understanding that this might be it, and we don't like to think about it. But it's true. And then the question comes down, so if this is it, if this may be it, what are we going to do about it? What does it make us do? I guess if it makes us kind of sit down in the corner and cry or become despondent, then it's bad. But if it turns that despondency into action in the more spiritual sense, then I think that's good and that's important to remember where we came from and certainly where we're going. So, any questions, any comments?
I think the last sentence was my favorite there. I read ahead and read it. Unremitting prayer is the death of despondency.
There you go. And again, why is that? I mean, when you're praying, what are you doing?
You're listening to God, hopefully.
And you're listening. So maybe you just might get some advice as to why maybe you're having these different problems with your life. Maybe why you feel that you're having so many problems with your prayer life. Why you're having so many problems paying attention in the church service. It's very difficult. I mean, but those are the kind of things that Satan likes to work on. Obviously, right? Telling you, boy, this is boring. Or think about all the things you could be doing. Or worse yet, think about all the things you should be doing. Right? Not could be doing. That would be fun. All the things you should be doing. They need to be done. And then you're sitting there thinking, oh boy, and then pretty soon your mind starts wandering, and that's not the purpose certainly of the Divine Liturgy. It's not there to bore you. It's to sit there and praise and to develop that sort of spiritual muscle. So it's a tough thing to do. So, any questions? Anything else? I'd like to go ahead then next week. I know we covered 2 chapters tonight. Those are very short. Step 14, gluttony. All right, let's see. We'll read this as an opening. Gluttony is hypocrisy of the stomach. Filled, it moans about scarcity. Stuffed and crammed, it wails about its hunger. Gluttony thinks up seasonings. Creates sweet recipes. Stops up one urge and another bursts out. Stop that one and you unleash yet another. Gluttony has a deceptive appearance. It eats moderately but wants to gobble everything at the same time. Wow, tough. So we'll go ahead and we'll pick that up next Monday. That's a little bit longer chapter. And then I believe we're talking about stopping for the summer. Now, I'll talk to Father Gabriel and find out exactly how long. I hope it's not as long as Advent. That's kind of long, but I know he had some other ideas of some different things he wanted to do. I'm looking at you. What does your husband want to do? That's why you're here, right?
I want to run some ideas of
Yeah. So, thank you very much.